Hawaii really did lead a national movement to revitalize Native American languages, including Native Hawaiian, and the right of Native Americans to be educated in their own language. Our two former senators, Senator Inouye and Senator Akaka, really led the charge on that. So how do you plan to continue building on the foundations set by our two senators, Senator Akaka and Senator Inouye, to support survival and growth of Native Hawaiian language? And this is a 2-minute question.
We face that issue all the time. And you know, it's very different in the Senate than it is in the House, as long as the Senate is the majority are Democrats. In the House, where we are a minority and Native Hawaiian education and the monies become an issue, there is one way that we have been able to consistently protect it. And that is with the help, bipartisan help of Don Young of Alaska and Tom Cole of Oklahoma, the only, for a period of time, the only American Indian in the United States Congress total. And what they're able to do is they're able to step forward for us and say that unless Native Hawaiian education is also protected, unless it's also protected, they will not support the whole of the Native grants. So that is the kind of commitment that we need. That's a skill set that we all have in terms of, are we able to move across the aisle? Because we're not always going to be in the majority. We may be in the minority one year, we may be in the majority next. The classic example was, of course, Senator Inouye and Ted Stevens, Republican and Democrat. Senator Akaka and Senator Mikulski, her father, also Democrat and Republican. And that's the kind of coordination, working together with one purpose. And that is what you need to have everybody work towards, which is that it is the benefit of the people, the benefit of the indigenous people, the benefit of the Native people. And if we are all able to pull together, these programs will survive. And that is how we've done it now, even with the Republicans in control of the House. And that is how we should always work to preserve the education.
Thank you. Mr. Schatz.
It's important that you ask this question on Hawaii Island, because Hawaii Island is really the birthplace of the Native Hawaiian immersion program. And Punana Leo and in Kea'au, that program, that idea started many, many years ago. And it was really just an idea. And what it has done for communities, what it has done for kids is really extraordinary. And it's not just giving a sense of pride, although that's important. It's allowing kids to excel in the way that they're likeliest to excel. And we have seen the Native Hawaiian immersion programs across the state of Hawaii grow and grow and grow in popularity, but also in terms of the results. They are doing right by these young girls and boys, and eventually men and women. They are extraordinary, and we ought to be really, really proud of them as people of Hawaii, but also Hawaii Island people. Here's the most recent problem. Despite all of their success under No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and all of the federal sort of testing regimes that are there, the U.S. Department of Education wants to test in English only. And so there are two ways to solve this. One is through legislation, and with John Tester from Montana, who's a friend of mine and has lots of Native American Indian tribes in his home state that do wonderful native language education. He and I have co-introduced legislation to make it clear that native immersion programs ought to be treated differently from the perspective of both No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top. In other words, if kids are learning in native languages, they ought to be tested in native languages so we can continue to allow these programs to succeed. If we can't pass legislation, we're also sort of leaning on Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education, to make sure that on an administrative level, there's as much flexibility as possible for these programs.